Hadfield, and I and Dr. Sarah Lieberman are the module conveners for a second year class here at Canterbury Christ Church entitled Global Governance. Sean, I'm delighted that you've had the initiative to put this video together. It's going to entail me and you and a couple of other students. The main thing that we're going to be looking at is the overlap of climate change and health issues. So I'm going to be interested to get your feedback and those of the students in the class as to why it is that in terms of climate change as a discourse, we don't hear a lot about health and global health.
It's generally about oil and economics. That's right. Generally the main brunt of the argument. But the issue of climate change is, whilst it's going to affect both weather and demographics and economics, there is a human effect to this as well, which is most tragic, really. And that has been largely overlooked in the last 20, 30 or so years, that climate change has really risen to become an issue.
Exactly. I think one of the nice things that we're going to be doing in this module is explaining to students not just some of the main global governance themes like climate change and global health, but ways in which institutions and regimes might be able to come on tap as something of a solution. Sean, what's your take on that? Do you think regimes are something of a solution with regards to these?
I think to some degree, but because we can't just operate on a state-by-state level, it has to be, because that's too much of a patriarchal, it has to be an overlapping solution. And so the only real way to do this is through IGOs, NGOs on a global, if not supranational level, because the state system is too much operating on self-interest.
Okay.
For instance, with the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, at the time the United States were one of the leading emitters at the time until 2008, but they never ratified it. And so that kind of shows that operating on an interstate, intergovernmental level, with something as of having global consequences like climate change, they're going to operate on self-interest. And so that is why we do need a supranational level.
That's right. In the class, we were talking a little bit about the difference between a national interest and a collective interest, something which is specific and difficult, and yet something like climate change and also I think global health, which is no respecter of borders, and perhaps suggests that we need collective responses, possibly in terms of decision making, maybe supranational responses following in the lead of the European Union, but that's fairly heavy lifting for many states. I think at this point a combination of IGOs and NGOs is probably, as regards regime building, the way to go. But as you said, it's as much to do with the right kind of mechanisms and the observance of mechanisms like treaties to be able to get things done and to carve out an effective solution. When you were doing a little bit of basic research about climate change, what struck you in terms of the health issues, current and future, which might be rising?
Global temperature in the last 100 years has risen from anything from 0.6 degrees centigrade to up to 1 degree Celsius. Or 1 Fahrenheit, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but that has huge overarching consequences. Like the knock-on effect is huge, the ripple effect is huge. That was one thing I did find striking, just how slight it was, how slight a change, how much of a huge effect it could have. But also at the human level as well. I mean, I looked at on was it greenfacts.org, Desertification Synthesis Report 2005. There was research into Asian drylands. Out of 1,000 live births, 61 deaths were of infant mortality rate was huge. 61 out of 1,000 of infant mortality, and this is just 10 years ago in the 21st century. But also, I read something in the Independent today. The Stanford University analysed 166 countries based on their economic output and their temperatures, their general temperatures. And they said that the optimum temperature for economic output is 13 degrees Celsius. And the caption was, and it's quite apparent from the study, global warming is like taking from the poor and giving to the rich. Because by 2099, should the global temperature rise again by another degree, North America, Europe and North Asia, that will be fine. Increased per capita incomes by 2099, they're already leading the world economically.
Right.
Whereas those who are poorest, you look at the poorest nations, they're going to be hardest hit. So I believe Niger and Ethiopia are one of the poorest. They're the poorest countries in the world. Ethiopia, as we know, for the last 30 years, has been hit by famine, as well as political instability.
That's right.
And the issue is, whilst as more economically developed countries can take a kind of a moralistic stance on climate change, we must bear in mind that our restrictions on less economically developed countries based on the presumptions of climate change are actively harming their economies, and in addition, they're harming their own populations as well, because their main focus is not going to be sustainability. In less economic countries, people's focus is more going to be on paying their rent and managing to feed their families, and that is a main issue.
So I think what we talked about in class and what we're beginning to see here is that in areas around the world where you already have some serious problems with regards to deforestation or desertification or droughts or famines, and we've been able to identify places where you have inland deltas, Bangladesh, for example, southern parts of the United States, Egypt, but also places in the sub-Saharan Africa, the Sahel Strip, for example, places that are already very, very hard hit by climate change, and also are economically unstable and possibly politically volatile. I think when you have that mix of those three particular conditions, you're looking at outcomes, and not necessarily long-term outcomes, really quite short-term outcomes, with the increase of temperatures of 1, 2, 3 degrees. That's going to have an immediate and profound and permanent impact on these populations. So I think the time is now, with regards to looking at the overlap between climate change and global health issues. And I'm hoping that the upcoming conference in Paris in December, with regards to all of the participants, as many as possible, can understand not just that the climate change leitmotif, which is of real importance, but the additional areas like climate change and global health, and sort of see areas in which the overlap is so incredibly pressing, and in human terms, not just economic terms, not just emissions terms.
Yes, because I mean, well, one of the famous pieces, Tragedy of the Commons, the term was first coined by William Foster Lloyd in 1833, and this was more in regards to agriculture, but was taken up by Garrett Harlan in 1968, when he was looking at overpopulation.
That's right. Yeah.
And this is 1833. You can look and see the potato famine in Ireland followed quite shortly afterwards, and that has changed. That has altered Ireland's history forever. It is unchangeable, and in applying it to in the context of climate change, that means that there is no going back once the effects take their course. It is permanent.
Exactly.
And so that is something that we have to bear in mind, which is why reasonable and strong action is required now. But we have to bear in mind, that it is on those who are the worst affecting the environment. So like those are the more economically developed countries, especially in particular when you're looking at the upgoing run. So you're looking at USA, China, and also India and Brazil at the moment. Those that really do spring to mind as the most, with their economic outlook developing, and as well as their industrialization ongoing.
Exactly.
But that does put into a difficult context where North America, Europe have industrialized. Why can't we allow these other nations to do so as well?
I think something like the tragedy of the global commons is a helpful metaphor for understanding not just the increasing expansion in a variety of demographic terms of the world that we live in now. I think it brings it home very much in material terms.
Yes.
And we watched a couple of clips and got a sense not just of the profound material impact, but, and I think you pointed this out, the irreversibility of things like climate change, and the need, I think, to be aware now, to have a common agreement on definitions, and a sort of an agreed series with regards to agendaizing and nailing agreed limits. But again, this sounds like the climate change discourse, and I think we need to be very careful to understand that within that are human conditions, lived conditions, health conditions. And I think what's so important about the kind of discussions I hope that we're going to be having at the Parliament is the way in which those two discourses have to be seen to be symbiotic. They reflect the needs and the abilities of states, of societies, of communities above and below the state level. So I think what's going to be interesting is to see the way in which those narratives overlap, but also at the international level, ways in which treaties, I think, can be a bit more intelligently crafted and a bit more holistically representative, if you like, of these various
more tailor-made.
Exactly right.
Rather than just a blanket solution.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.